Hello, everyone. This is Fernando with Next Trend Realty, and welcome to our webinar. Today, we're going to be focusing on some contracts, but first, a little bit of housekeeping. I know I always do this in every training, but it's just reminders. Make sure you're connected to our Google Chat and our Facebook private group so you can receive messages as we provide that to you. Make sure you attend training courses via webinars or in person. I'm planning on scheduling several courses this month of July. Make sure you submit all your paperwork to contract compliance. If you have a listing, go ahead and do that right away. Like that, Shelly and I and the management team can review your file. Also, after the third day of the option period, all is over, please submit your paperwork as well. That way we can catch errors before they get worse. And we're trying to catch up with our clients to sign things or initial things after a correction. Again, as always, you can always contact our leadership team. We're always here to assist you. You're not alone. Okay, so today we're going to be focusing on residential listing agreement overview, the buyer-tenant agreement overview, supporting amendment overview. I've been receiving several questions about, hey, how do we fill this out? In particular, the compensation section. So we're going to be drilling on that. So let's go to do the demo. I'm going to be going into dotloop. For some of you that are brand new agents, dotloop is our mechanism for filling out forms, the contracts, the TREC forms, and then send them over to our clients to sign. So this is dotloop that we use. But of course, you can use Transaction Desk or Zip Forms if you wish. Okay, so we're going to look at the buyer documents first, and then we'll go over to the listing documents. So there's a new document for the residential buyer-tenant representation agreement. So whenever you have a brand new client that you're going to be showing homes so they can purchase, with a new rule for the NAR settlement, it's now mandatory to fill out this residential buyer-tenant representation agreement before you commence your activities with that client for purchase. So it's very important for them to sign this form first before you start showing houses. Okay, so this one is called the long form. So we're going to drill down on it. I already kind of pre-filled it so you guys can kind of see like a demo of it. Make sure that you have the client's information on here. And what I did last night and a couple of nights ago, I made sure that the templates already have some of this information pre-filled for you. So that way you don't have to chase what's our address for Next Trend Realty and so on and so forth. So you're going to notice as soon as you pull it up, when you first initiate a loop, you're going to notice some of these fields are already pre-filled. So you enter your information. Sometimes I get a question about the phone number for the broker section, and that's not the office phone number. That should be your phone number because you are doing you are working with your client and you want your client to contact you. If you put in the office number, it doesn't hurt, but the problem is it's going to go to our office, and then we're going to have to chase you. So it's better to put your own phone number. Of course, it works the same way with the email. As far as paragraph 3C, the market area, I already have it pre-filled out for Houston and surrounding areas. This includes Katy, Hockley, Tomball, Magnolia. You don't have to write all that. You can just say in surrounding areas. But with this new NAR settlement, they do ask if the client only wants specifically to see houses in a certain area, and that's it, then you should change this and put that particular subdivision or area. But if If they're just looking at houses in different areas, it's okay to leave it this way. Also, the term has to do with the agreement between your client as the buyer or tenant with you, and when it starts and when it ends. This is very important to make sure you have it filled out. Also, if you want to know if this is the latest and greatest buyer rep agreement, you'll notice down here at the bottom it says TXR 1501, and it's dated June 24, 2024. So if you don't see that, then you don't have the latest and greatest. Another key hint is if you see the word long form. Okay, so the broker compensation. In my past webinar, I had mentioned that they don't want us to use the word commission. They want us to use the word compensation. So that's something that we need to start practicing in our vocabulary. Now, this is not applicable for commercial transactions. I know one of you or two of you are familiar with commercial, but this is not applicable for the commercial side. But for the residential side, they don't want us to use commission. Also, you're going to see this verbiage mentioned everywhere. Broker compensation or sharing of the compensation between brokers is not set by law nor fixed, and so on and so forth. And then broker compensation is fully negotiable. So this verbiage, this paragraph is very critical for you to communicate with your clients, including sellers, that it's always negotiable. And that was one of the issues with a lawsuit is that the sellers felt like, or the perception was, that they were obligated to pay the buyer agent 3%. But here the statement is it's always fully negotiable. Okay. So whenever you're filling this out for your buyers, it's best to communicate with your buyers and ask them that there may be situations where the seller or the listing broker is not paying any compensation for the buyer side or the buyer agent. And then you need to ask them, and we're going to be working on scripts and things like that so we can practice this, but you're going to have to ask the buyers if they will be open to paying for the compensation if for some reason the seller is not paying for it. Of course, this is all fully negotiable. We can always, as buyer agents, submit an offer. When we submit an offer and ask the listing broker, hey, can we, and with this offer that we're providing, we also will, my buyer also would like to include that the buyer agent receives a commission. Again, that goes with leases as well. Typically leases, of course it's negotiable, but it's 50% of the first month's rent. Again, similar inquiry, with the listing broker, with the landlord be willing to pay for the 50%. Okay. Now there's two fields here, and what I've been noticing is I'll notice that an agent will put in like 3% right here, but they also put something like $340,000. I've been seeing that, and this has nothing to do with that. And you need to pick the word or. Focus on the word or. It's this or that. And you don't put 340,000, which might be the sales price. An example might be $1,000. Okay. So let's just say that the buyer is willing to pay you $1,000. You would only fill out $1,000, not the 3% on this other. So please be sure, make sure that you're only selecting one paragraph or one field or the other field, not both.
What a good example for that, or like not the 3%, but the or, like if we're doing a for sale by owner or FSBO, like they want to pay us a flat rate and we just put that in there to do this. Okay.
Right. So the $1,000 would be the flat rate that you're talking about for FSBOs, for example. And if you're not sure what a FSBO means, it means for sale by owner. Same thing goes with the rental. It would be 50%, or this one is not an actual whole number where you put like a, you know, $500. Here it says, or a percent of all the rents to be paid over the term of the lease. That means that if they're going to be doing a 2-year or 3-year term, that's where you would use that paragraph. And now over here is where you would put the flat fee, like if it was a FSBO, like a for sale by rent, we'll call it. Then you would put $500. Okay. So my point here for this particular paragraph is you only fill out one field, not several fields. Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions regarding this broker compensation? Okay. All righty. Another thing that I've been noticing is that this protection period, I've been seeing 0, like it's blank. And that's okay to do as far as 0, but not blank. Because in our office, our contract compliance, we're not sure if you omitted it by mistake. This protection period has to do with when the buyer agent relationship terminates. Let's just say the buyer says, hey, you know, I'm giving up, I don't want to see houses anymore. And that you say, okay, you can terminate this by using a buyer termination of contract. This is just a 1-pager. But what happens, what the protection period does, is that once that termination date starts, there's 30 days after that where, just in case the buyer decides to contact the seller and say, hey guy, I got rid of my agent, and then the seller goes, yeah, I got rid of my listing agent too, now we don't have to worry about commissions, let's do this under the table. If you guys find out as a listing agent or a buyer agent, well, guess what, you can claim that commission that was owed to you because you procured that buyer, that potential buyer, to the seller. Okay, so it's a protection for us agents. All right. County, I noticed that sometimes I see Fort Bend and I see other things here, other counties here. No, it's always going to be Harris forever. If you read the sentence, it says amounts payable to broker. It doesn't say where is the house located of the subject property. Okay, so it's always going to be Harris. Okay, but I put it in there anyway, so you won't have to change it. Intermediary status, again, it's always going to be intermediary status. We hardly ever do no intermediary status. Some people or some agents might not know what this really means, but in a brief example or an answer is that the buyer is allowing the buyer agent to show houses that are listed by NextTrend Realty. That's what that means. If we select no intermediary status, that means that the buyer does not allow us to show them houses from NextTrend Realty. So that's what that means. But always select 9A, which I already did for you anyway. Okay. Addendas. I know sometimes agents get confused with amendment and addenda. An addendum means a document, promulgated form that's added to this document. An amendment means a change of the contract itself. Okay, so this addenda, paragraph 16, has to do with what's being included in addition to the buyer rep agreement. What else is other documents are also being attached. So think of addenda as attached. And primarily we use the information about broker services, general information notice to buyers and sellers, and then the wire fraud. Depending on if it's a tenant and others we don't really use other like get a home inspection, not if it's a rental. But I already kind of pre-selected them for you guys. The special provisions, we've been told over and over again by TREC and HAR, do not use it at all. We're not attorneys, so we cannot write any legal language. If for some reason you're in a situation where you're working with a buyer, landlord, tenant, or seller, and they want you to add something that's not on the contract, please contact our office, and one of the leadership team will talk to you about it. So please do not use special provisions. Okay. And then the last one I already filled out, the license number. So you guys, all you have to do is sign it. Also, whenever you're looking at contracts, we have been noticing through contract compliance that sometimes there's a missing initial. What I usually do whenever I'm reviewing files is I go backwards. I start at page 5, and then I scroll up and I look. And when you're doing this backward review, you tend to find more errors or corrections. Because if you do it from page 1 to page 5, for some reason your eyes are very used to it and they don't really pick a problem or a missing initial. So it's, the way I review files is I go backwards. Okay. Any questions before we go on to the listing agreement? Okay. So now let's open up the listing agreement. Again, if you have a brand new listing that you're going to be doing, again, oh, I forgot to put Joe Seller here, but go ahead and fill out the information of the seller. Again, it's the same information. Broker has all that information. I already took the liberty to add the address and other things. Also, make sure that the legal description is correct. It's very important whenever you're dealing with contracts for real estate that the legal description is correct. If you want to know what the legal description is, it's always right here on your Matrix MLS. Okay. So like, for example, this legal description of a condo is the legal description. And it's everything. If for some reason there's a misspelling, let's just say that they misspelled Hudson Oaks, and there is missing an S or it's missing an A or something like that, you need to write it exactly like the way you see it. Okay. So make sure that you do that. Okay. Exclusions. I've been noticing that sometimes agents forget to put things that the seller's removing from the property. And also make sure you're very specific of what's being removed before closing. Like here, for example, I have washer and dryer, but I also have chandelier and dining room. I didn't just write chandelier, right? Now, I wrote the word fridge, but it's better to write the word refrigerator, but I did it because it didn't fit. But it should say something like refrigerator and garage. And then people ask me, well, why, Fernando? Why do I say refrigerator and garage? Well, I have 2 refrigerators. I have one inside my house in the kitchen, and then I have one in the garage. So if I say refrigerator, which one is it? You have no clue. And then if the wrong refrigerator is taken from the seller, let's just say that the seller took the actual refrigerator from the kitchen, and your buyers show up to the house after closing with the keys, and they don't see a refrigerator in the kitchen, but they see a refrigerator in the garage. They're going to be very mad at the buyer agent. Okay. So be very, very specific. where things are located. Or you can even say stainless steel refrigerator and kitchen. You see how specific that is? Okay. So make sure you do that. Also, owner association, make sure, you know, if it is yes or no. If you want to know where there's a, going back to exclusions, if you want to know where it says exclusions on MLS, some agents that are pretty sharp will write it right here where it says exclusion, they'll put here washer dryer. So that's where it's located. Again, the listing starts and ends. Again, broker fees is similar. It's similar to the buyer rep agreement, but the only thing, there's an additional section B. So let's look at section A. So broker fees with compensation for other broker. What they mean here is the listing broker will receive compensation and the buying broker will receive compensation. So when earned and payable, seller will pay broker the following. Again, it's a or. So here you would put something like 3%, or you would put a flat fee, but not both. Okay. If for some reason, you can use this one right here. This is in case if the seller might say, if list price, then, you know, 3%. If 10,000 less, then 2%, you know, so that's what they mean by that blank. We call that variable. That's what that means, variable. So it varies. So that's what that placeholder is for. Okay, so that's part one. Part two talks about how much is the buyer agent going to receive. So in a fantasy world, we're going to call it, because of the NAR settlement, it kind of made it into a nightmare. In a fantasy world, you're going to see it this way, typically. Broker fees, 3%. If the other broker represents a buyer, 3%. So that's what you're going to see. Another thing I've been noticing is that agents are forgetting to do the little checkbox. Okay. Again, we have to repeat this. Broker compensation or sharing of compensation between brokers is not set by law. Broker's compensation is fully negotiable. Okay. Now this other section, 5B, this has to do with when the seller says that they're not going to pay, or the listing broker is not going to pay compensation to the buyer agent or buying broker. That's why it says here, without compensation for other broker. Here it says with compensation for other broker. This one says without. So this section would mean that the seller and the listing agent have agreed that there's only going to be commission for the listing broker. That's what that means. So 5A1 and 5A2 is one of them, with compensation for other broker. 5B, without compensation for broker. Okay. So it's one box or the other box. This is really critical, guys. So hopefully y'all kind of understand it. Any other questions before we move on?
Can we call this, instead of dream world, like good negotiation world?
Yes. Good negotiation. Yes. Okay. Any questions, guys? All right. Protection period. I already went through that. Again, it does the
Fernando?
same. Yeah. Yes, Gary.
Yeah, sorry.
No.
A little bit of confusion there on that 5A and B. Okay.
Sure.
The B component you're saying is paying only to the listing broker, not to the selling broker.
Correct.
Is that
Correct.
that what I'm understanding?
Correct.
So if you ever use the 5B, that means you're not getting paid.
The buying broker, or like you said, selling agent, is not getting paid. Correct.
Okay. So that's a pretty critical one.
Yes, very. And this is what we've never, ever, ever have experienced, right?
Right.
The 5A we've experienced, but 5B we've never. So 5B, think about it, blame it on the NAR settlement. 5B.
Yeah, I understand,
Yep.
but I wanted to make sure because the wording is not really all that clear that it's
Right.
only the listing broker that would be getting paid.
Yeah. And
I don't.
instead of saying other broker, they should have said buying broker, right? That's what.
Yeah, well, they should have said. Yeah, I mean, we interchanged the buying, the listing broker versus the selling broker
Correct.
versus the buyer's broker. I mean, those terminologies get
Oh yeah, I
intermingled.
know they get intertwined sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
But yes,
So
so
5B is a no.
well, whenever and whenever you're doing a listing appointment, uh, our normal listing appointments were, hey, how much am I going to sell my house for? Hey, do you have any liens or judgments? Hey, are you a foreigner? Hey, are you urgent to sell? All these inquiries that we do with the seller. But now it's having a heart-to-heart discussion with them and saying, hey, in order for there's different ways of marketing this home to sell. Are you willing to offer a compensation for the buyer agents that bring in buyers,
Yeah.
customers? Yeah.
But I mean,
So,
it's primarily the buying broker that is doing all the paperwork,
correct.
and you know the
Yep.
the listing broker is only reviewing it with the client.
Right.
So yeah,
And,
okay,
and what our leadership team is going to be working on, and I'm also working on with other seasoned agents, and I would appreciate your help too, is how do we write a script for our young agents, and it has to do with the value proposition, right? How
yeah,
can a buyer agent produce a value proposition to their principal, the buyer, or to the listing broker seller, right?
well,
So we need to think about that.
I don't want to sidetrack you, but I'm going to go back on history here. I always ask for the criteria of what the buyer wants, and I use the rule of if it meets 80% or 90% of what you want, you should be very strongly considering buying it. And if we're doing our job, we should not be showing more than 10 listings
Oh, I
on that.
remember that. But yes, I remember back in the old days of that. Yes, 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 yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and I had a friend whose wife was here. He was in Qatar, and they gave me their criteria, which changed 4 times. I ended up showing about 100 listings, and it
Yep,
was ridiculous. But
yep.
that's what I should have terminated it, but I did
Right,
terminate the friendship.
right. No, that's great. That's very good. Yeah, and we can put that in our value proposition as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Kind of like best practices, right? Best practices.
Yeah. Don't
Yeah,
don't get
perfect.
caught.
Yep, yep, yep. No, I love it. Thank you. Recently, Gary Spargo just joined us. He's an old friend of ours, me and Shelly's, and we're very, very happy and pleased for him joining us in our family. So I really appreciate his experience. So welcome aboard again.
Yeah. Thank you. And like I said, where Fernando goes, I go.
Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Welcome.
So go ahead. Is there a question? I thought I heard somebody.
I said welcome, Gary.
Yes, yes. Ali,
Yeah.
Gary, that's Ali. Okay. Listing services. Again, whenever you're listing property, make sure you select paragraph 5. If you're going to be doing a coming soon, because MLS does give you that capability of flagging the property on MLS as coming soon. You don't select this one, you select this other one here. And here it says seller instructs broker not to not to file this listing with one or more of the MLSs until so many days. And the max is 21 days that HAR allows you to have a coming soon, but it could be less than 21 days. And then for the purposes of, you can write here something like seller is repairing, dishwasher or something, whatever the reason. So you have to have a reason why there's a hold, to put it on the MLS. But in the HAR, whenever you're creating a listing, you have a choice to put it on coming soon. Now, coming soon does not allow you to receive or accept any offers. You can receive them, but you cannot accept offers, nor can you show the house with coming soon. If the seller says, hey, I'm all excited, we just got an inquiry, somebody wants to buy the house, you have to tell them, well, we need to remove it from coming soon, make it active, even if it might be less than 21 days, make it active so you have permission to receive that offer and accept it, okay? Or show the house. So coming soon means do not show the house, where they go inside the house to look at it, or execute a contract. All right.
Fernando, pardon.
Yes, sir.
I need to ask you this question.
Yep.
Will not the buyer's instructions override that requirement?
Well,
I mean, excuse me, I misspoke. Will not the selling client, if they give you written instructions?
Oh, yes.
That would override this.
Correct. Yes, they would call Gary and say, hey, Gary, thank you for sending me that offer. It looks really good. It's cash. And they're going to tell you, remove it from coming soon and make it active.
Do they have to do it active? That's my question.
Yes, you have.
Okay.
Yeah, HAR doesn't want pocket listings.
Okay.
They cringe when they hear pocket listings.
Got you. Okay.
Because coming soon is kind of like a pocket listing, if you want to kind of think about it. It's kind of like, hey, man, somebody's selling the house over here. But you can't see it. You can't see it.
They used to do pocket listing, and some of them, they are doing it. They do pocket listing, and before it comes to the market, they sell it and they do pocket.
Yeah, I can date back to that. I had one. I was still writing putting together the listing on the MLS, and I sold the house in 45 minutes.
Boy, that looks good for statistics.
Yeah.
Whenever we do a CMA report. Yep.
Okay.
So that, yes, you have to move it to active. And then in 45 minutes, it becomes executed. Schedule companies, Showing Smart is what we use, but you don't have to use them. That's part of your $450 a year. You can use Showing Times and other different services, but I have Showing Smart in here. Very important here, it says broker is authorized to place a key box on the property. What does that mean? That means a lockbox, a combination, a super lockbox. The broker is authorized by the seller to place a key box. That's what that means. Okay. Intermediate status, I already went through that. Again, so this is really important paragraph, and I notice sometimes 11C is completely selected. And please be very careful with that, and particularly the VA and FHA. Those loans are government loans, and there are specific requirements. In particular, the house itself. Since it's a government loan, they're going to want to make sure that the house is safe. It's secure, safe, all that kind of those words. And what's going to happen is the appraiser of FHA or VA, the appraiser is like a gentleman he drives a little white pickup truck with a little ladder, and he goes in there and he's there 20 minutes, and he's going to check. It could be a female too. He's going to check, and he's going to go, oh, something's wrong with the back door. There's mold. Well, he's going to write on his report, this house will appraise at 335,000, but the following things have to be repaired by the seller at seller cost. Okay. No, buyers cannot fix anything. Not if the appraiser of FHA or VA says, hey, these things need to be repaired. And no, there's no money that has to be exchanged. The seller at seller's cost has to do the repairs. Then once the repairs are done, and of course they have to be done by a licensed, if it's an AC or things like that. And then they complete the repairs. Then the inspector charges the buyer $175, I think, or $200 to go back and take a picture of the repair that it was completed. And then they'll put it in their system that, you know, it appraises at 335,000. Okay. So whenever you're at a listing appointment and you're in this section, this paragraph, you need to ask the seller, are you okay with accepting financing from a buyer that's VA or FHA? And
Fernando,
yes, sir.
another comment, please.
Mhm,
Okay,
yeah.
on VA and FHA, also there is an element in where the seller contributes to the buyer's closing cost.
Right. Correct.
And so that's another thing they have got to be aware of. And Texas Veterans Land Program gets into a lot of other issues because then you got another contributor to the cost of the house, well, the sale of the house.
So whenever we're talking to the seller, we need to make sure of these things. Yeah.
That's why I just want to interject.
Oh, no, I love it. Thank you, sir. Okay. Another paragraph that's brand new is this one right here where it says seller does or does not authorize broker to share with other brokers and prospective buyers that the seller will consider contributing an amount towards buyer expenses, such as buyer broker fees or other expenses payable by buyer under a sales contract. So this one, I'm still trying to understand it. But here is I guess it's a disclosure by the seller that the seller is authorizing broker to share with other brokers and prospective buyers that seller will consider contributing. Of course, in bold letters, it says seller's not obligated to pay any specific amount, and it has sole discretion to determine the amount seller will pay towards buyer expenses during the negotiations with the buyer. So it's kind of like seller says, I'm okay with it or not, but I'm not obligated if I change my mind. That's the way I think the paragraph reads.
That's where your BRA is so important.
Yeah. And BRA, guys, means buyer rep agreement. Yes. Okay. But yeah, that's important. If anybody has questions, please let me know. Another thing is, and this is kind of uncomfortable sometimes when you're at a listing appointment, but there's a section in here that says seller's current and not delinquent on all loans and all other financial obligations related to the property, except for, so whenever you're talking to the seller, make sure you ask them, sorry for intruding, but I need to ask you this question. Are you up to date with your HOA dues, with your property taxes? Do you owe anybody like a painter, HVAC guy, a plumber? Those are called mechanical liens. And they'll say, no, I'm up to date, blah, blah, okay. But if you find out later on they were not up to date, now that's going to be a delay in or may cause a delay in the closing. So you do have to make sure you talk to them about that.
One bit of other added on this, because there is one particular subdivision in Magnolia area that under the HOA, they collect about 0.5% of the sales price of the house as a transaction fee. And
Oh.
that cannot be paid by the seller. It has to be paid by the buyer because the seller pays equal.
Yeah, that's really important. Do they
Yeah,
call
Ben,
that a capital reserve fund or something? Don't they call it something like
it
that?
is. It's how they maintain the facilities like the golf course,
Yeah,
the club, and all that.
right. Yeah, good to know. Very good. All righty. Again, special provisions. If you have a request by the seller, please contact our office just to make sure we're not practicing an attorney verbiage. Addendas usual, like what I just said earlier, but here I included also property insurance and special flood hazard. This is our broker requirements, and then the general information and notice to buyers and sellers. By the way, whenever you're a new agent, or even if you need a refresher, it's very handy to read this general information and notice to buyer and seller because it's got different terminologies of how real estate transactions talk. So it would be very wise if you could read that document. Okay, paragraph H and 21H. I've been noticing that this is left blank. And if we read it together, it says if seller is a foreign person, a buyer might be required to withhold certain amounts from the sales proceeds. And then it talks about what a foreign person is. And the choice is or is not a foreign person. Now, typically, it's always not a foreign person. And whenever I'm in listing appointments and I'm addressing this particular question, I do tell them, sorry for intrusion again, because last time I talked to them about mechanical liens and such. I apologize for this this query, but I need to ask if you're a foreign person, yes or no. And then they ask me, well, why do you ask that? I said, well, because if you're a foreign person, then the IRS is going to hold back and about 15 to 20% from your net sales, and that has to go over to the buyer agent. I mean, to the buyer, and then the buyer has to submit it to their IRS. So this paragraph, if you look at it, it costs 15 to 20%. We had a situation a long time ago. One of the agents forgot to ask this question, and at closing, the title company, the escrow agent, informed the seller, hey, since your wife doesn't have a social security number, we're going to have to withhold 15%. And he got very upset. He goes, but I have a social security number. He goes, yeah, but your wife doesn't. So in other words, both marital people have to have social security numbers.
Fernando, are you sure they both have to have it? As long as one
Yeah.
has it, is it not going to be enough?
No.
Wow.
Because remember, here in Texas, I think it's community property. That's why.
Yeah, Fernando's absolutely correct on this one. I've been there, had a British citizen with a Chinese citizen wife, and I had all kinds of issues.
Yep. And so another thing, when you're talking to people, I mean, talking to the sellers in a listing appointment, please never assume anything. Because they could be, you know, you think they're American by the way they talk and the way they look, but they might be from Canada. Or like Gary, you just said, what was it? What country were they from? The ones where you have the issue.
He was Brit and she was Chinese.
Oh, Brittany. Yep, yeah. So England,
yeah.
You know. So never assume anything. Always ask the question. because you don't want to be sitting at the, let's just say you select it's not a foreign person, because you're assuming you didn't ask the question. And then 5 days before closing, the title company says, "Oh, we asked you to provide us your social security," and they're like, "Oh, I don't have one." Well, that could become a bust out, and they're going to blame you as the listing agent, because they always blame somebody or want to blame somebody. Okay. And again, similar, broker, printed name, I already kind of pre-filled all that. Any questions before we go on to the next? Sounds like everybody knows how to fill out this document. So hopefully whenever Shelly and Miriam see it in contract compliance, it's going to be perfect. No errors. I also wanted to talk about amendments. So let's just say that you already have a buyer rep agreement, and I'm going to call it legacy before June 24th. And you want to modify that agreement because, well, you know what? The better thing is, let's do a listing. So let's just say that your seller says, "Hey, I found out, or I heard about the NAR settlement and compensation. You know what? I don't want to pay 3% to the buyer agent anymore. I only want to pay him 1%. And of course, you, the listing agent, and him and her talk, and y'all trying to think about the marketing strategy. But let's just say that that's the conclusion. Well, you're going to need this amendment to listing. And when you click on the amendment to listing, here it's got a paragraph C and a paragraph D, which is kind of what I already went through, where it talks about the compensation. And then you would modify this. So let's just say in my example that I just used, where the seller says, "I'm willing to pay you, Fernando, as a seller, listing agent, 3%, but Gary, I'm only going to pay you 1%. Okay. But of course, Gary hasn't submitted the offer yet, but we're using Gary as an example. I would select here. Oh, wait a minute. This book has changed to. Oh, yeah. And here I would put Fernando gets 3%. And then the compensation paid to the other broker, here I would put 3%. I mean, 1%, according to my
Fernando,
example.
what about if they put these numbers and then somebody sends a contract and they say we're going to pay 2% or whatever, and the seller is going to change their mind and they're going to move forward with the 2%? They have to go back and change this one and like create an amendment. What should they do?
Yeah. I've taken several classes or webinars regarding this subject, and we are no longer allowed to receive more commission and
compensation.
I mean, sorry, yeah, thank you, Gary. Compensation. So you may have 5 amendments, because every time you receive an offer, it's going to be different, and you have to redo this. Oh, it's going to be a headache. It's going to be a big mess. But yes,
sort of like commercial.
I don't know. Maybe Gary can attest to that one, since he does commercial.
I've done a lot of houses with not taking any commission in that, but the issue too, though, when you're talking to your seller, is to make sure that they understand that the listing agent has the client, and they have taken and matched the house that the seller's listing with that client, and they have brought the person there. And that's one of the important things that the seller needs to understand on the paying of the buyer's representative.
Right.
Yeah, without
Plus
the
the
buyer,
seller
there's no sell.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Gary. I think you were finishing your thought.
No, that's just
Okay.
it. I mean, that's the main thing.
Okay.
Is you know, I know we're in a flux,
Right.
and
And
it's ridiculous. You know,
yeah. And Jennifer, what were you saying?
To communicate to the seller that without a buyer, there is no sale.
Well, that's part of the value proposition to the seller is, and it has to do with marketing the house. We never ever talked about. We talked about open houses and social media postings and pictures and virtual staging. All that is what we would talk to the listing agent. I mean, to the seller. But now we have to include commission compensation to a buyer broker to push the sale of the house and sell it quicker. So
Also, now is our job to sell too. It's not like in the past that the sellers were going every time paying 3%. Now we have to ask for that for our commission. And I sometimes I would say tell the like the seller that you only have one house to sell, but the buyer has millions of houses to buy. So you probably have to compensate something. It's not going to be like for free that you want to sell your car or you want to sell your house and you don't pay any sales commission or compensation.
right. No, that's great. That's great. Good. Good. And what I've been hearing from all these other webinars that I've been attending is things may change again after August 17th. So right now we're going through this change and obstacles and comprehension, trying to understand. But these forms may be modified again, or certain paragraphs might be modified again, once we really use them after August 17th. Or us as agents, we already using them, and we're going to report this to TAR, Texas Realtors, and go, hey man, that paragraph doesn't make sense, and then they go, oh, you know what, 1,000 agents have already told us the same thing. We're going to update it. So that might happen. But for right now, we got what we got. Last thing I wanted to focus on is the amendment to representation agreement. And I already mentioned this to one of the leaders of that's doing these presentations. Oh no, not this one. It's called Amendment to this one. So whenever you're working with the buyer and tenant, again, sort of like with the seller, where the seller says, oh, I don't want to pay compensation to the buying broker. Here is the opposite. This is the buyer agent goes, hey, I heard from the news that now we have to pay you guys. Okay, how does that work? Well, first, this is the form to use for that. It's kind of similar, where it has the boxes again with broker fees, and if the buyer agent says, hey, I'm willing to give you 1% to help me, or show houses, or a flat fee, I'm good with that. It's one or the other. For leases, similar. Hey, I'm willing to, which I don't think we're ever going to use this one, but let's say they only want to pay 25%. So we use this box. But one thing that I already reported that I wish that they would have added to the regular buyer rep agreement is this box right here, which has to do with bonuses and other compensation. So us realtors, there's certain unique situations where there's BTSAs. BTSA stands for bonus to sales agent. And this could be the lenders, the builders offering BTSAs, or it may happen with the sellers too, because they haven't been able to sell their houses because the houses are still staying long in the market. They may say, hey, listing broker, let's offer a BTSA. It's very crucial that you use this amendment to buyer tenant representation agreement if you find out that the builder, Lennar, KB Homes, Toll Brothers, or the listing broker, per the seller, are offering a bonus. If you don't fill this out, you do not get your bonus. It's mandatory that you do this box right here. So it says bonuses and other compensation. In addition to the broker fees, broker will receive other compensation from the seller, landlord, or their agent in an amount equal to, and I just put in 3,000. If a client purchases or leases the following property, you notice how it's specific to the property. Back in the old days, if we found out that 10 houses, we were showing 10 houses, kind of like what Gary said about no more than 7 to 10 houses, and 3 of them were offering BTSAs, we didn't have to, we usually never told our clients, but some of us did tell, hey, guess what, I'm getting a BTSA. But it didn't matter that we had to disclose it, you can say. Now, it was disclosed in the closing statement, the HUD statement. It has to be disclosed there that we were getting a bonus. But here now there's this box within this amendment where we have to disclose for that particular property that we're going to be receiving a BTSA, and it has to be signed by your client, your buyer, and you. So this kind of slapped me in the face. You know how Jennifer talked about the that fantasy world? Well,
Now they want a part of your BTSA too.
Well,
so I mentioned that to please add this box inside the normal buyer rep agreement box, because it's not there. The only place I found it was right here in this amendment.
Okay, so in that case, if we can amend downward, then we can amend upward for BTSA. If in the case that they've been shopping resales and then they decide, okay, I want a new build, and then we're offered a BTSA there, then we need to do the amendment, have them check that off and approve.
Right. And let's just say that KB Homes offers 1%, and Lennar offers $500, and Toll Brothers offers $2,000. I did this on purpose. You notice how I use percent and I also use whole numbers. This cannot be a percent. It has to be a whole number. So if one of the builders is offering 1% BTSA, you have to manually calculate and put the equal of and put it in here. You cannot say 1%.
you're best to put it in writing to your client, and an email will suffice.
About what?
If you're getting a BTSA, and
Oh, okay.
you know,
Just in general, yeah. Right.
yeah, and I'll offer to split it with them.
Oh yeah, I mean we typically do the like I sold recently sold a transaction last week. It was with Lennar, and it was 2% 2% compensation and 1% BTSA, and I offered my 1% towards closing costs. You know, like a buyer rebate. So yeah, you know we've done that in the past, right, Gary? It's just something we've done in the past.
Absolutely, yeah. You do
But
what you
now
got
we
to
have
do
to
to make the sale.
disclose it. Now we have to get permission or approval. That's the thing. Because whenever somebody signs a document, that means it's an approval. So yeah, I feel a lot of sad faces right now through the webinar, and I understand your pain. So any questions on the BTSAs? I left this,
The
I
good
left,
thing-
I
the
left
good
this one
thing is
for
the broker-
last.
The good thing, the brokerage doesn't want any money, any portion of your BTSA. Some brokerages are asking for a portion of your BTSA too, so we don't ask.
Well, thank you very much for Next Trend Realty.
Yes, thank you. Next time.
I don't want to mention any names, but me and Gary and Shelly are from there. uh, they used, like when you were in the mentor program, they would actually also use the BTSA as part of that calculation. So you're absolutely right, Ali, that there are brokers that will also grab the BTSA. Okay. Let's see. That's pretty much on there. Again, I'm gonna keep on reminding you guys until August 17th. Broker compensation or the sharing of compensation between brokers is not set by law nor fixed, controlled, recommended, or suggested by the Association of Realtors, MLS, or any listing service. Broker compensation is fully negotiable, and brokers independently determine their fees. This is this paragraph came out because of the NAR settlement. Okay. Again, contact numbers. We're always here for you guys for assistance. Here we are here, and our numbers and our emails and such. Any questions? Make sure your devices are on mute. I mean, unmuted, I should say. Okay.
Fernando, you want to turn off the recording, and then after that, if anybody has any questions off the camera, off the recording, you can ask.
Yep. I'm going to return it off right now. Stop.